Okay, so Ivan, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you to Stephen Cranfield at the back there, who was the host who kindly organised the William Evans Fellowship that brought me here. So the technology needs.
It's one click of being happy. I just clicked. So up and down.
Oh. Okay, it is true, things are upside down. Okay, so here's the agenda for the talk. It's in the context of this project that we've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years called the Autonomic Power System. And in particular in that, there was one of the streams which was to get the active participation of consumers. So this was to engage people themselves in their usage of power and energy. And our particular angle on this is that we started looking at something we call decentralized community energy systems. And to support those, we wanted to base that on the idea of communities and self-governing institutions based on the theories of Elinor Ostrom, who I think for a Centre of Sustainability, most of you should know who Ostrom. Speaking on behalf of everyone, yeah, we know. And then here are the areas that have actually this is what we were working on, and hopefully this will resonate with some of you and have a discussion about these. But we were trying to formalise social capital, to do some form of resource allocation, to do collective awareness for crisis management, and then this idea which I'll explain, polycentric self-governance in terms of how to try and scale these up from small local things to large national infrastructures. And right at the end, if there is enough time, I will have a quick rant about why this stuff matters, at least to me. So the Autonomic Power System was trying to address this idea with a fully distributed intelligence and control philosophy. So really trying to pull in all the developments that have been made in information and communication technologies to try and control the grid in a more intelligent way. And of course, this was actually trying to underline a few policy goals. So, for example, the low carbon transition. Somebody might like to tell the Australians about this. Sorry, Jason. They're waving their coal around here. We're trying to get away from that. The fact that there are, increasingly we are seeing that we're able, because of miniaturization of processes, we can instrument everything. And if you can instrument everything, you can get things to connect together. You can get lots of things to connect together. You can do something which looks like it's very intelligent. And this, of course, is at the same time trying to cope with the increase in uncertainty and complexity. So uncertainty, of course, is because as we go to more renewable technologies, there's increased stochasticism involved, and in complexity as you sort of put these things together in larger and larger systems. So we have a European grid. It turns out you're more susceptible to non-linearities. So curious things happen in one part of the grid, causing blackouts a long way away, which you do not anticipate. So this was the objective of the project. It had these 4 areas: resilience and risk management, self-star, network operation and control, autonomic economics, and the active threat that I was involved in, the active participation of consumers, and that's what I want to talk to you about. So the idea here is that we were trying to get away from this traditional model of predictable provide. Okay, so that you actually, based on what you've observed before, you predict how much energy is going to be needed, and then you try and provide that. And then when somebody presses a button to turn something on, the power station somewhere ramps up its production, and when you turn it off, it ramps it down again. This has got a number of problems associated with it. One of these, of course, is that to actually cope with the problems of peak demand, you actually have to have excess capacity generating at any one time. So to accommodate the peaks, because of course it's cyclical, you need far more asset producing stuff than you're actually using at any one time. So this is not good. Secondly, if we're putting more and more emphasis on renewable energy, then that only exacerbates that effect, because of the stochasticism that's involved. There's an adage apparently: don't waste wind. Yeah. So if the wind is blowing, then you generate electricity. I mean, but if it's blowing in the middle of the night when nobody actually needs it, you're still generating it, and you've got to put that somewhere, for example. And the alternative is when you do need it and the wind's not blowing, then you have a corresponding problem that you're having a shortfall. And of course, if you're over-generating, and as I said, you've got the low carbon transition, this is not helping if you're over-generating. So we have this various problems, but also various other pushes going on. So scheduling becomes much more complicated when you've got stochastic demand. But we also have this trend towards local generation. So it's becoming more common for people to have their own photovoltaic or PV cells installed on their houses and generating their own energy, which they could then feed into the grid. And we also have the possibility that more of our whiteware, fridges, washing machines, dishwashers, and so on, are coming with more or less programmable displays. So you can actually say when it is that you want to actually turn these on. And so if you want to wait for when the cost of electricity is lower, if it's not an imperative need that you have your washing done immediately, then you can actually delay it and have it scheduled overnight. So you're seeing more of these smart appliances that you can actually control in a limited kind of way. So in terms of consumers, all of this is increasing focus on, rather than actually doing predict and provide, to changing emphasis to the demand side management, and really sort of trying to base it though on this notion of a market for energy. Now that's all very well, and it's possible that you could try and do this by installing a smart meter in everybody's house, so you could do this limited kind of programming. But it turns out there is a certain amount of resistance, at least anecdotally from what I've read, to the installation of smart meters in domestic residences. So let's sum up: who's got a smart meter in their house? Who wants a smart meter in their house?
Actually, in New Zealand, we don't have that problem. It's a UK problem.
Right, okay, so thank you.
There is not that resistance occurring here for other reasons.
Is that right? Okay, there's probably what I'm going to say, why these reasons are. Certainly, because in the UK, you'll wander around with these smartphones and we voluntarily pick them, but in the UK, there is this resistance to smart meters. That's interesting, of course. You should have in New Zealand, sort of culturally specific background. But so my problems are your problems, but not necessarily. So this is something we could have learned from you. Why is this that we accept a smartphone, even though this is tracking me a bit? It knows where I am when it's doing. Well, but there are these reasons at least. First of all, at the very least, I opted in to take this. In the smart meters, in the way it's been rolled out in the UK, it's legally obliged, so you've got no opt-out. There are monitoring going on, so there are concerns over privacy. If there is any intelligence in the smart meter, it is not operating as the primary beneficiary being the end user, where in that case it does. Yeah. And things like personalization, customization, and in particular generativity are not encouraged. What I mean by generativity, of course, is the fact that this is capable of doing things which its designers didn't actually expect it to do, because somebody designs an app for it, but goes beyond what its original functionality was, make phone calls and take photos, but then becomes this powerful device that we, as I say, can personalize, customize, and create, design things ourselves, which were perhaps not intended by the people that gave us the platform. The SmartMeter, at least in the UK, does not permit that. So the thing is, one of the things that we've learned through many attempts to instrument infrastructure, it is highly sensitive to users. And this has happened when they've tried instrumenting water irrigation systems, it happens with transportation. And when I was talking, when working on this project, and I was mostly power systems engineers, and I did seem to have this impression that the consumers were frankly the same kind of programmable device as all the other objects in their network. So all the generators, transformers, pylons, and for those of us who have been around a bit, that's me, I should have said, actually, for anybody expecting to see the young man on the posters has been scattered around the campus, disappointed to get this. So here we are, the Centre for Sustainability, but Jeremy was not sustainable. So we've seen this, you have to take the users into account. And back in the early 80s, we could write papers on human-computer interaction with titles like "Know Thy User" and "The User is Not the Enemy." And it almost felt like that you could write systems for power system, sorry, papers for power systems conferences along those same lines. You're not, your user is not your enemy, but you've got to work with it. You cannot control them the way that you might think. So one of the things that we were suggesting, that if you want to do participation of consumers in smart grids, then we should actually bring in some of the things that we've taken from human-computer interaction, and so this was user-centered and participatory design processes. So you actually consult them in the design of the processes, and also some of the other aspects that we've been working on, which were concepts of institutions, self-organisation, and governance. I wanted to put that all together in this idea of the community energy system, which there are different types. So the idea here, of course, is that you have a house, let's call it a smart house, and one thing that we have got in the UK that you haven't got in New Zealand is we've got cavity insulation, double glazing, which believe me, you could do with. With all due respect, I know it was founded by Scotland, but I mean, I know they have these other virtues. And there's some stereotypes, but the one being thrift, where you just put on extra jumpers when it's cold. Anyway, I digress. It's all being recorded, isn't it? So you have this smart house, and you have your various appliances connected to your smart house, and they need electricity, but you might have your local generation, windmill stuff, your PV cells on the roof. You might even have your smart car attached there, something with sort of battery that you want to charge on somehow. So there's your smart house, and it's generating stuff, and you're using stuff, and everything would be perfect if the amount that you generated was equal to the amount that you used. Unfortunately, on some occasions, you don't generate enough, so you've got to get something somewhere else, and on other occasions, you generate too much, in which case you might burn stuff off. And waste it, and that's not what we want. So what you want to be able to do, of course, is team up with other smart houses, or even just other houses, or even just other renewable systems, and create what we might call a distribution institution. So that what you're doing is that you're actually provisioning, energy to this common pool, and then you're appropriating from it to power your devices. And you can also imagine that there's actually multiple institutions going on here, storage being the heart of them. So you can imagine that which are generating too much. But there's a separate institution that's going on here where you have houses connected with providing storage, and you've got a storage facility. And of course, interesting enough, our electric vehicle could also be used for that. So herein lies a tail end digression, asking about this in terms of this big distributed battery and what you could possibly do with that in terms of changing the model of transportation. But we'll save that one for later. So this is us for as one of these community energy systems. And we have these institutions. These institutions are basically a set of rules which are determining how it is that we're going to do this distribution and storage. And what we're going to do is build these on the design principles of Elinor Ostrom. So Elinor Ostrom got the Nobel Prize in 2009, although, as I pointed out to her, that the first paper I published on her work was in 2008. So obviously these two events were correlated. She looked at me. He's English. He's probably joking. But so her work was basically looking at ideas like the tragedy of the economies, which you're probably familiar with, but the idea that that if you had any common pool resource, that people would act in such a way as to deplete it in the short term, even if it's in nobody's interest in the long term. And she said, yeah, well, okay, that's very well, and actually we can reproduce that in the laboratory, and the game theoretic analysis will tell you that's what's going to happen. But that's not what we observe in real life. And so she came up with a huge amount of field work to show that throughout time, throughout history and throughout geography, communities of people had got together and they had defined sets of rules, made up sets of rules, which allowed them to sustain a common pool resource even over many generations, so that the people who hadn't been involved in creating rules to start off with were still prepared to follow them generations later. The second step she made was to observe that even with all these examples, it turned out that just having a set of rules wasn't enough. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Then she observed when it worked, there were 8 features that these systems had in common, which made them sustain, and when it did not sustain, one or more of these features was missing. And so then she took one last further step and said that, okay, if we know what are the necessary features of an institution that will sustain a common pool resource, if we're faced with one of these collective action problems, don't rely to luck of evolution to create the sets of rules that you need. Design for it. So what she did, she took these 8 common features and then she re-expressed them as design principles so that you could actually supply institutions with the necessary features to ensure that we could sustain a common pool resource. So then one of the things that we did in some early work here is that we created these things we called self-organizing electronic institutions. And we appeared at that time really concerned only with computer network and distributed system management in open systems where, because they're open, you don't have a centralized authority that's telling all the components what to do, and you don't have a guarantee that all the components are going to follow the rules. So under those circumstances, how can we do it? Well, we thought you can look at it as a provision and appropriation system, as a common pool resource system. And so then we set about re-expressing the design principles in computational logic, as actual executable rules. And then it turned out that we could build systems that if we had those rules, then the components were there and they were able to maintain an open system and sustain it over time. And this we referred to as effectively algorithmic self-governance, because essentially we were following algorithms to do our governance, but critically it was the components themselves that were doing that governance, that's the self. And the fundamental one of this was actually Ostrom's third principle about collective choice, that those who were affected by a set of rules got to participate in their selection, modification, and application. Think about it, that's what governance is all about. So then we started working on this autonomic power system project. And we said, well, okay, what would happen if we took these rules that we formalized in computational logic and we injected it back into the kind of system that actually inspired us to formalize them in the first place? Because that, of course, is what you can see is going on with one of these community energy systems. You know, there we are, we've got a set of rules. Well, okay, let's design it as a provision and appropriation system. And now let's give it some computational support. So this is what we were trying to do. And as this basic platform, algorithmic self-governance, providing us a platform for the three things I want to talk to you about now. First of all, the formalization of social capital. Secondly, this notion of collective awareness. And thirdly, polycentric systems. So let's look at this first one, collective action for resource allocation. So if we're paying attention, to demand side, we want to take into account the desires and behaviours of the users. I really don't like this word. I almost don't like it as much as I don't like social capital, actually, as a word, but the prosumers, because they are producers and consumers of the energy. So let's call them prosumers. So we've actually got active participation of prosumers. So we want to take care of them. Then we can consider this scheduling problem as a collective action problem. What you have to do is find allocation of resources in terms of energy, which not to necessarily make everybody happy. It's not optimization, but everybody's at least satisfied with what they've got. And that might mean, of course, that because this is not a one-off game, it's a repeated game. Right? You're doing multiple allocations over time. It may be that you don't like the allocation that you got this time, but you compensated by getting what you wanted at another time. So this is why it's not optimization, but it might be, let's say, satisfaction, satisficing. By satisfy fully, but satisfies to a sufficient extent. There's a difference. Okay? So we're really going for satisfaction. So we can look upon our dCES from as a common pool resource management, and so it's a pool with endogenous resources. They come from outside. We have provision and appropriation actions because you're putting in energy and you're taking stuff from it. We're going to have these institutions, these sets of rules to determine provision and appropriation. And we're going to have several of them, okay? In two ways. One, we saw that there was a distribution and a storage institution, but you can imagine that even these community energy systems are prey to the same phenomenon that the individual smart house was. You may sometimes be generating too much, so what are you going to do with it? You may on other occasions be generating too little, so where are you going to make up the shortfall from? It turns out that one of the ways that we have of resolving these satisfaction problems is by using social capital. So what we want to try and do is do this demand-side self-organisation using social capital. So this is social capital. So this is what happens when you have interacting provision and appropriation systems. So the classic example actually is a water irrigation system where you have what they call top enders and bottom enders. So the people at the top who need to access water, and people at the bottom who need some. And water has this sort of thing about gravity; it goes down, so from top to bottom. So you have an interesting problem, but the guys at the top could just take all the water and leave nothing for the guys at the bottom. Why would they not do that? Well, it turns out to maintain the irrigation system, you need everybody to participate. So if the guys at the top take all the water, then the guys at the bottom don't help in the maintenance of the irrigation system, so the guys at the top don't get any water either. So they don't take all the water, so that there's stuff for the guys at the bottom. Guys at the bottom then help with the maintenance of the irrigation system, and the whole system survives. So effectively what you've got is two provision and appropriation systems, and they're synchronized in such a way that actions in one create social capital, which is used in the other to make sure that provision and appropriation goes on. So Ostrom, with her colleague TK Owen, looked at this and said that social capital has multiple different forms, but essentially it's an attribute of people that enables them to solve these collective action problems. And so she identified at least three different forms of social capital. She called it trustworthiness, but we probably think of this as a reputation. So that there were networks, so these were kinship groups, friendship groups, family groups, and so on. And then there were actually the institutions themselves. They were a form of social capital. Because you had a belief that there was a rule going on and an expectation that somebody else's behavior would follow that rule, and that at least in the context of an institution, if they didn't follow that rule, then there would be a sanction. So these were all forms of social capital that would enable you to make complex decisions about whether how you would act in a collective action situation. So, however, rather than thinking about this as what social capital is, it's actually more constructive to think about what social capital does. And what it does is that it coordinates these expectations. It creates accountability because it says what are the rights that we can, and entitlements that we have to expect others to behave in a way that are specified by these rules. And also, critically, it shortcuts the complexity. I mean, there's no polynomial time algorithm that if you have a general form of an n-player k-action game, that you can compute the Nash equilibrium for that game. So what you do, well, is do what we do all the time, faced with a situation like that, you find a shortcut for it. So we tried some various experiments, and the first one we did was a very simple one, which was just involving the exchange of favours. Motivation for this was in part in the idea of trying to smooth out demand, so that if you have multiple dishwashers, it's generally speaking, everybody wants to put them on after dinner. And thus you create a peak, whereas actually it would be much more sensible to allocate a time period and generate that. Although, of course, you don't mind the peak if that's when you've actually got a lot of energy. Anyway, so there are all these sort of things that you would want to take into account. So what we did is that we set up this consumer exchange arena where we could self-organize the slots that you allocated electricity based on a pairwise negotiation and social capital. As we see. So in this exchange arena, the consumers demand certain electricity for a certain time slot. Somebody comes up with original allocation, and then after that, you can start swapping your time slots, ones that you want, or if you've been allocated one that you want and somebody else has got one that you do want, then you can swap them over. So, details, we populated it with 96 kinds of basic consumers. We had two types: the selfish consumers who only would accept an exchange if it improved what they wanted, and the social consumers who would swap with somebody else even if it didn't improve their allocation. And so what we said was that if you did a successful exchange, that would count as a favour. You've got something that you didn't want, but somebody did want it. They've got something that they didn't want either, but so it doesn't matter to you which one of these things you've got. So you'd swap it with them, and it would make life better for them, but then they would owe you a favour. what we'll do is actually, when there was an exchange and somebody had something that I wanted and he had something that, I had something he wanted, he had something I wanted, both swapped, that was two favours. We've done each other a favour. And the thing is, then you could actually use those favours to make swaps later on. And so this is what we found out, that we measured how the satisfaction metric, and it turned out it was much better to actually sort of swap the time slots, generate these favours, and then you could use these favours later on. And this is brilliant. I mean, this is what the economists call externality. It's something that is created. And then here, I told you about this. This is the genius of people. Yeah, that's right. When I said intelligent systems and natural stupidity. But here, we make up a rule, and then we make up a value associated with complying with the rule. It's fantastic. Yeah, it's absolutely great. And this is actually how we progress social systems.
Just a question of clarification: is this real consumers or is this agent?
These are little agent models. Yes, yeah. So very simple agent models. Yeah. One of the things that we kept on thinking, we should try this with real people, but we couldn't get 96 people to do it. So, yeah. But it would be interesting to try, sure. We then generalize this. I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but we from this basic framework, we came up with this. Well, I said we. I didn't do half of it. I just sat there while the PhD student did this whole generic framework for social capital and formal representations of all these different types of social capital. We would have this event translator going on to things would happen in the environment, in particular the outcomes of games, so that you actually have a game. This would update these forms of social capital, and this would tell you what you should do. And it turned out, of course, that you could get this, we were playing very complex games of this, and it was largely linear, so the complexity was completely gone to make these decisions that would then go if you had to participate in one of these collective action situations. You can read the papers for this. I'm sorry, time is pressing. But, 3 series of experiments that we did in player games and nested enterprises, which we'll come back to. But the significance of this is that this full representation of social concepts and processes can be used to regulate interactions between autonomous agents. Yeah? And the point is that this is not a transactional economy. It is purely a relational economy based on reciprocity or esteem. And this believes me to believe that it is possible to incentivize behavior based on values, for example. And so, I guess you have the feed-in tariff type system for.
We're possibly protected.
Interesting. Okay, yeah.
So just that they might be a good idea, and
well,
policymakers don't seem to like it.
Yeah. Well, it could be a good idea. I'd say why. I mean, because so the feed-in tariff is that if you're doing local generation, then you could actually provide some of that to grid, and they would pay you for doing that. Of course, actually, in the UK, it found out this is massively popular. Loads of people were trying to do this, and they completely over-generating what they expected it was costing them. So at the same time, there we are in a situation where some households are generating far more because they can afford the investment in PV cells, and that there are massive areas of the country that suffer from terrible problems of fuel poverty. They simply have not got enough to heat the houses, cook and so on. And the thing is, this is all based on the assumption that you're going to want to make money out of it. But you say, well, okay, I'm generating too much money. Here, I donate it. There it is. You have it. You give it to somebody who hasn't got enough. But what you get back is some kind of indicator of your charitable giving status. That would motivate people to do this kind of activity. Not everybody is driven purely by financial imperative. Of course, you could say to me, well, you know, if you do that and start making donations and giving it to people for free, how are we going to make money out of that? Well, allow me to retort, yeah? You don't have to. I mean, this is what you get if you insist on privatizing your national infrastructure. Yeah? Don't do it, right? It's quite simple. Yeah. But no, in the UK, actually, it's going to get even worse after a certain vote last year. So we're in a mad scramble to sell off all our assets before the whole thing goes down the proverbial. Anyway, is that recorded as well? Yeah, they'll never let me back in. No, it's such a bad thing. Okay, so in the last few minutes I've got, I don't know, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Oh, okay.
I've got 20 minutes.
Oh, perfect. So,
Right. It'd be nice to be a couple of minutes for questions.
yes. So the next thing that we did was to wonder about what happens in at the extremes of these things. That would work when you're just doing a certain amount of, you're just doing the resource allocation, everything's working nicely. What happens when you find that? So this was a scenario that was provided to me by my friend and colleague Mihai Sendulia, who used to work for EPSRC in Romania. And he said, okay, so you've got a group of users, and they're all provided from the same low voltage network. If they all start using stuff too much, this transformer starts to overload. It's the power systems people among this is as close as I ever got to actually doing a power systems. So the thing is, if you overload this medium voltage, low voltage transformer, a trip goes on there and it goes off. Yeah? And so you get a blackout on this side, and then people start to ring up and complain, where's my electricity gone? So what he pointed out to me, well, you know, if they can be bothered to ring up and complain, perhaps they could be bothered to turn something off before the trip actually happened. Yeah? And so, in fact, then, if a critical mass of the users participates by turning something off, then you can avoid the trip. And of course, this is a classic game theoretic type of problem, because if you're the only one that turns something off, you still get the blackout event and you've lost the benefit that you would have had up until that point. Yeah? So it's only if everybody turns something off that you're going to see the benefit. So how do you get that form of coordinated action, which, you know, there's game theoretic analysis will tell you won't happen. Right, however, it can. Yeah? So our approach to this was based on something that we called collective awareness. Yeah? And so just as social capital was defined as an attribute of individuals that enhance their ability for successful collective action, we called this an attribute of communities that enhances their abilities. And the thing is, it's based on an interoceptive sense. Okay? So we're all used to the idea that we actually have 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, feel, whatever they are. You know, it's often said that I should have a 6th sense because I'm so deficient in the other 5. But you also have these other senses, one which come from within. Yeah? So hunger and thirst, yeah, are these senses, and they're sort of found as interoceptive. Yeah? So it's about maintaining the well-being of the whole by reacting to a stimulus that is coming from within. So when you're hungry, you go and eat to do your well-being. So I think, well, maybe the same kind of thing applies to communities. Maybe there is a sense that comes from within, which actually stimulates everybody to do some kind of action that preserves the well-being. Because without this, you do get a diminished appreciation of causation of what's going on and your participation. You're less willing to adjust your behaviour, and you're also less willing to follow norms and rules, so you feel outside the community, so you don't participate. So we suggest that you can actually use this collective awareness to square the triangle, if not the circle, because we take into account different user preferences. So if some people are not, as I said, really want to get the cheapest electricity when I can. On the other hand, a lot of people are saying, well, I'll pay more than I need to, as long as I've got a guarantee that when I go and press one of these buttons, it comes on. The second thing actually is that really you need to encourage almost a lifelong relationship with infrastructure. I mean, we don't even think about it, but actually we really do need to, if we've got problems with climate change, to think about these things. And the third thing is attention is also, if you like, a common pool resource. And it is something that you provision and appropriate from. And of course, lots of people have got many different things that they want to work on. So you're not paying attention to this lifelong relationship all the time. So some of the ideas that I had seen for trying to check the state of your electricity was that they had this egg which would glow this nice green colour. It was cheap electricity and glow a nasty red. That's okay, but then, all right, you can have one egg for your electricity, or what about one egg for your water, when the water quality is good or bad, or another egg for your air quality. What about another thing for the carpet, when the carpet's looking water? So how do you know, you end up with a whole row of these eggs, and you're really not going to want to pay attention. Always, some of them are going to be red, so you're never going to be really happy. So this is not necessarily the way to do it. You don't want something that's in somebody's face all the time. What you want is few people paying attention, and you to do something when it's necessary to participate in. So our hypothesis is that we could supply prosumers with a sustainable institution where they would self-organize their own energy provision. If we design the interface based on OSTROM, so we had these basic rules about participation and so on, and then did the following, added the following features to the interface. So we made it really clear what was going on. Interface cubes which we encapsulated our design decisions, and we're making them visually prominent to the participants. You needed good participation, visualization. So we were trying to make perceptually significant that which was conceptually important. You make sure you could have social networking, so fast, cheap communication. We'd have this feedback going on, so that we do this small action, contributed to a larger overall action, and it achieves some beneficial outcomes there. So you turn something off, you avoided the trip action, and so you didn't get a blackout. And then, of course, this social capital that I've just been talking about, so we provide incentives if you did something successful. And the interface we designed was this. So it was a serious game. So this was a virtual reality system where we created one of these distributed community energy systems, if you like, made up of these smart houses. Now, I mean, I wish my smart house would get some. We would want one like that by the sea. And the sun's shining. We have PV cells at the top. Generating our electricity, you go inside, you have your appliances, and you could operate the appliances. And so the aim of the game was that we would set the people in the village, the community energy system, a task where they had to perform certain tasks with their appliances. So of course the obvious thing is you go in there, you'd switch everything on, but if you did that, of course, what we would do is that we pretend we were unneeded. We'd start off as a nice sunny day, we'd make sure it all went cloudy and rainy. Oh, you don't like the needed weather jokes, do you? All right, okay, so somewhere else where the weather is nothing like as changeable as it is. Anyway, so the point is, so we turned everything off, And then, of course, they'd get this sort of blackout. There wouldn't be enough. So the question is, could you actually coordinate your activities, agree with each other, to schedule things in a certain way so that you were able to avoid this blackout situation? This is work of one of my PhD students, Katerina Burizeri. She called it social empowered, but I really wanted to call it more so, the massively online real-time self-organization, for the simple reason that if you read it backwards, it says, it's good, isn't it? Come on. You get European projects for this alone. Here, there's a smart meter in here, and you're using then the smart meter to get this inclusivity, engagement, and empowerment. And of course, you could delegate the need for attention, but then you could aggregate it using this notion of interoceptive awareness. And I think I got the results here, but we did do results with experiments of this on people. Unfortunately, again, they're relatively small scale because there are only 3 houses in the village. So it was only 3 people, but we did find that the more we allowed these principles of interaction design and interface design, the more we added them in, the more successful people were in being able to avoid this blackout event. And so the final thing I want to just mention briefly is how do we scale this up? How do we sort of start putting community energy systems together? How do we start aggregating them with larger and larger systems? Now, this was a problem actually that Ostrom was much concerned about, especially when it came to climate change in her later work. When she asked herself the question, is it the case that large-scale collective action problems with correspondingly large-scale outcomes, planetary-wide outcomes, are they best addressed by large-scale government policies operating from the top down? Because one of the criticisms that was often leveled at her work was that they always seemed to work in small-scale situations, but never seemed to apply in the large, and this was it, the apparent failure of self-governing institutions to scale up. Things are, again, if you look in detail at the evidence, which is what she did, there isn't very good evidence to show that there are systems, especially like cities, for example, where you have multiple diverse actors. They were actually organized in ways that were productive rather than a purely chaotic fashion. And so this was a feature of complex systems. There seems to be chaos, but actually there is sustainability is an emergent phenomenon. And this is work that she really did with her husband, Vincent. It turned out where that was most successful is when the system of governance was polycentric, by which she meant that there were multiple centers of decision making at multiple scales of activity. So, of course, we want to try and replicate this somehow in our community energy systems. Now, I didn't say what the 8 features that she identified were at the start, but 6 of them are listed here. So this was the idea that you had membership, you had congruent rules, participation by collective choice, monitoring, sanctions, and dealing with conflicts. The point is there's lots of different ways that you could instantiate these. So here's one which is based on nice social relationships. Here is another one which is based on a red in tooth and claw market-oriented arrangements. So lots of different ways that you could organize yourself a community energy system. So then, of course, how is it that you want to put them together? Well, the thing to do is to identify all the different actors that are involved in these situations. I could find at least these 8. So there were agencies involved in the administration, there were the appropriators themselves, there were the service providers offering infrastructure equipment. You were expecting things to go wrong, so you wanted ombudsmen for courts, there are regulators for consumer protection, there will be citizens advocacy groups who'll be putting pressure, various policy officials at different scales. And critically, of course, we also have the app entrepreneurs, the people who are developing applications for your smart meter if it was open in the appropriate way. And so the thing is, all these different actors, all of whom have different goals, and you want to actually be able to take them all into account. Of course, it starts going wrong when you ignore the users altogether. You only sort of concentrate on sort of making a profit out of this as much as you can. And then you don't worry about other issues like climate change and so on. So that wouldn't work. On the other hand, if you flipped it over the other side, someone's got to put the wires in somewhere. Someone's got to maintain those wires. Someone's got to do the research, which has seen the change in efficiency of PV technology, for example. So all this has to be paid for somehow. So clearly, the point is, you need a system. It's a complex system that makes sure that you have this, if not optimization, at least satisfaction of multiple goals at multiple different scales of activity. And the key thing here, there were two other principles, which are 8 principles. So the first one was this principle 8, which was about nested enterprises. So you had sort of small local situations at the bottom, they were aggregated into larger and larger structures. And principle 7 was expressed like this, the minimal recognition of the right to self-organize. And what that actually means is that this is a constraint on the relationships in that nested structure of nested enterprises. It turns out that the only non-controversial word in the minimal recognition of the right to self-organize was probably of, actually, because when we tried to formalize this, it's incredibly hard. So, what does the minimal action mean? Who's doing the recognizing? What did you mean by right? How are you doing the self-organization? And so on. And it's very interesting because the balance there is quite tight, because you want to be able, on some occasions, you want to have a sanction, but you need somebody to impose that from outside. Yeah? On other occasions, you want to be able to form whatever rules you want, and you don't want some interference on that from outside. And getting that balance right appears to be quite a tricky thing, and it's really there that it's gone wrong. When you see cities, I think this is a problem when you scale. As you scale these things, it's the principle 7 that falls apart in ways that we don't fully understand. This is work from my colleague Ada Diaconescu, who's an expert in software engineering and holonics, and if you want to understand this, I'll let her speak to you about it. So that just leaves me to say, why does all this matter to some extent? Oh, because the Autonomic Power System project was supposed to be imagining what the grid would look like in 2050. And I don't mean 10 to 9, I mean about 30 years' time. And for a variety of reasons, economic, political, regulatory, environmental, economic, and sheer malice, for those of you who come across the book Blackout, talking about the hacking of that, it's possible that it could be that there is power rationing, and it could be that there is at worst blackout. If you want to deal with this, we need local solutions. So what is required is that we've really important got to unbundle the smart meter. It's almost like we are fighting the browser wars of the early 90s, when our dear friends at Microsoft wanted to bundle the operating system and the browser in one thing and completely lock you in. We have to unbundle that so that we can take advantage of the smart appliances which are being developed. And we can also leverage the ideas of community engine systems that I talked to you about. And then do as it, democratize the smart grid. The smart grid actually should be like the browser. It should have 2 layers. One is the grid-facing operational layer. which is just like your operating system, which is just getting information off your network and providing you with connectivity. On top of that, there should be this user-facing self-governance layer. So that this self-governance layer is providing you all the functions that you need to do algorithmic, interactive, polycentric self-governance, all the functions that you need to design your own applications, all the functions you need to provide you with this set of actors in the system. If you make this open and programmable, you'll get people coding for it, and they'll be designing all sorts of different applications for managing these things in ways that perhaps you had never really anticipated to achieve. You're skeptical.
Oh, no.
And this is what the smart meter should be for. I mean, we've had this hugely costly rollout of these things throughout Europe, and it is just, I mean, not only are they pernicious pieces of junk, frankly, but it's such a wasted opportunity. The squandering of the ability to really have an impact on climate change is so dismaying. I can't really sum up. Anyway, to conclude, this is, oh, sorry, I've gone over there. This is what I've done. But I mean, I'd also say that if you really wanted to, if you really were right about these things, it's an alternative paradigm, not just for smart grids, but for smart cities as well. As soon as these things start really interconnecting, you have a way of recognizing the fact that smart cities have also got people in them. And they're, it's not just about developing the technology and all of this. You've got to make it a place that people want to live. In that case, throw it over to them. Let them design the systems that they are happy with. That's my message. And just want to say thank you to all these various people that have been involved with this. Thank you again, for inviting me and organising me. Thank you, Stephen, for having me. Thank you very much. Thank you. Minus 3 minutes of questions.
Fantastic, Jeremy. Really, really interesting. Actually, the reason I laughed is so I did a postdoc at EUI in Florence, and so there you have the regulators in the industry looking at the design architecture of smart meters, and I just saw them pushing back against opening it up. I saw it how robust the industry was and pushing back. I guess I have a question, so I'm going to be selfish. I'm going to ask you first. How do we unbundle the smart meter? What's needed? Because I can see how that really. I mean, it's amazing how long we've had smart meters. The people aren't really using them.
Yeah, because you can't use them the way that you really want to use them. Yeah.
You don't. Yeah. It's like making them open source.
Yeah. Yes. So exactly so. Yeah. So what do we do? Well, I mean, quite evident after 5 years, me whining about it doesn't make any difference at all. So we've learned that much. But I think the sea change will come when the distribution companies and the transport companies finally realize that actually they are protecting a business model which has run its course. And that actually there is more benefit to be had from seeming to lose control and opening up than there is from keeping it closed down. But I mean, I fear that is a generational thing. You need people who are coming through with these new ideas. So,
but I guess my question was, what's stopping, smart guy like Dave over there developing an app? I mean, is it sort of having access to the smart meter? Is it the interaction protocols? What is it that physically stops?
Physically stops it. Well, technically, here probably nothing. Because you could do that. Because you could. I suspect there are people getting around. Hacking into the smart meter boxes and using that, getting the information of it, and then having their own things on top.
But the current standard UK installed smart meter is not particularly smart. I think it's mostly just doing a bit of data collection and serving up to utilities. It's not designed.
And this is what I saw. The utilities just wanted to save labor costs. They didn't want people going to read the meters, and that's it. They even objected to my directionality.
Sure.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, precisely. Yeah. So, but yeah, no, you're correct, and there's limitations in the device, and you're quite right to call it smart is a complete misnomer.
That's also a real problem. You just have that much trouble rolling it out, and then you need to try to roll out ones that are more programmable.
Well, that's it, because if we'd thought about it and people like me had won the argument, we would have actually sort of held back off this.
Yes.
You just said, one of these.
Cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
As I understand it, your demand side institutional participation requires social capital models. And social capital, I'm more interested in how you model it in your modeling system. Because if I do a favor for someone, I might get some credit for that. But that could be modeled as a local currency. And a self-interested agent might be interested in improving his neighbor's status just as another currency. The social capital is not that. Social capital is when I do something and it has a common pool associated with it, like common pool resources. How do you model it in your system?
in the favor-based system, but you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we start off with, that we've been very conscious about, is when you start making formal representations like this, we're acutely aware that what we don't want to do is to put it into a sort of quantitative form that will allow it to be commodified or metricated in some way. Because this is what we're saying. It is all this stuff, in effect, being replaced by metrics. So in academia and in social networks. So in academia, I mean, you know your H index. We all know our H indices. At least we do in Europe. Maybe I've got that part. But so everything is turned into a metric. The fact that you count up how many friends you've got on your social network. I've got 3,700 friends. It's nonsense. Yeah? It's just a ridiculous thing like that. Yeah. So you end up not doing here, but you end up pursuing likes, followers, and this kind of stuff. So the first part of your remark was absolutely spot on. Yeah. There is that issue. You take something that is a purely mental construct and you start trying to reason with it in a computational form, and there is this risk. The thing about how do you contemplate? Well, for the most part, we were doing these things in sort of like pairwise relations. Yeah? So when you had this framework, this was all internal. Yeah? So come from external signals, some of it the events, yeah. But effectively, this was something that was internal to the agent. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing, of course, one of the things that I'm just working on with Stephen, is this idea that there's collective social capital as well. So that actually your actions or even your inaction contribute or deplete from a collective.
That's what I call social capital.
Right. That's what you call social capital.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, the internal thing is just my own calculating system. Or I might want to improve my H index for social capital.
Yeah,
But the overall collective thing.
but individuals have social capital as well. So this thing about my reputation. If others have this this model of me in their part of my reputation, and so that on the decision making that's definitely used in coordination and the mechanisms, which is leadership. So if I have a high reputation and I do something, then I expect people to follow me, and they do, because of this social capital coming from a reputation. But essentially, it needs to be and ideally, of course, you don't sell that reputation yet. But if you start formalizing it, you could imagine that, and you really, really would want to do that. It would cease to function in the way that it would cease to do these things. if you start metricating it, it will no longer work for this, especially this one, accountability. If it's just a number, okay, well, I can break the rule and just pay you off. Which got something to do, actually.
One short question, if there is, or other one. Yeah, I just wondering about the concept of intercepted census in our communities. Isn't it just replacing for demand and supply? Have a excess resource or a demand I need and satisfy, like you have a user for you earlier. So that basically characterizes communities need to take action, but nothing but that.
I would like to think that it's more than supply and demand.
Okay. But doesn't it ultimately, isn't it operationalized in that very fashion in the context of self-organization?
I suppose if you really wanted to diminish it to its, I mean, if you're saying that the signal is something that that you're suffering, so that there's a demand to take care of it, and that the actions to resolve it are a kind of supply, then yeah, but then you could say in that case that hunger is a supply and demand problem. That seems to diminish it to me.
One question on the algorithmic self-governance. Will it imply that agents also generate rules autonomously, meaning not the users so much themselves, but now you're using the platform, which I believe I understand correctly, basically users inject the rules and then the system runs on its own, but it's not governing itself.
Yeah.
So now, what's the vision or the scope of this algorithmic self-governance?
We have designed systems where we allow the users to put in their rules, but there has to be in a relatively straightforward way. We've also tried experiments where we've had the agents themselves invent rules, and that does turn out to be extremely hard to do. But I had a student who was very inventive with this, came up with a scheme to do it. But this is a very interesting area. So, yeah, you know. And you're not going to ask me about values of blockchain.
No, I wanted to ask about the Ostrom count on the slides.
The Ostrom.
Ostrom count.
So I to get one off for doing it backwards.
It's incredibly low.
Yeah, I know, it's shocking, isn't it? Yeah. So, you didn't go bingo when it was first mentioned.
Okay, guys. I'd like to thank Jeremy very much, and if we could show our appreciation, that's fascinating.